do you know the secret of building a small business? It's actually one thing. It's retention. So there's actually a study that showed that the number one source of retention is not culture, it's not compensation, it's actually having a friend at work.
Welcome to the Fully Funded Show. Whether you're a capital raiser, deal sponsor, fund manager, or LP investor, we've got the insights you need for investing success. Join Sam Silverman each week for expert interviews, insider tips, and strategies to fully fund your ventures. Let's go!
All right, we are back with the Fully Funded Show, this time with my friend Sam Mahmood. Sam and I work together in our company, The Pave, but I'll allow Sam to kind of give his background, his entrepreneurial experience here as well.
Sam, it's an honor to be here. I'm Sam Mahmood. I am the GP of The Pave. It's our recently fund that we just launched. My background is actually primarily have been in medical device. I built a medical device company at the age of 25. I realized I was quite unemployable at the time and had about an 8-year stint as an entrepreneur. From that, recently I said, where can I go take my skills to the next level? And it was about buying and building companies. I've always had a deep passion for that, a small interest into real estate, connecting with you as well, investing some of your deals. And today we're very focused on buying and building infrastructure and paving companies.
So let's go take it way back before all this too. So walk us through your background prior to starting your own company. I think a lot of people like hearing in the show the background of how you got there, right? Whether it be the athlete background or the entrepreneurial background or the, how we really failed things background. So let's kind of take it back a few steps here.
Let's do it. So I come from an immigrant background. Parents are both born in Iraq, came here, and they lived the American dream. Either you're going to be an engineer, doctor, or attorney, and I did none of those three. So I decided to go sell medical devices eventually, but I started my career early on as an athlete. I was a soccer player, played Division I, went to Sweden, actually pursued a little bit of professional soccer as well, came back to the US and had an inflection point whether I was going to continue playing soccer, making about $800 a month, or taking a medical device job that was going to pay around $58,000 a year. I had about $700 in my bank account at the age of 24, and then realized that I had an inflection point to choose the more monetary value decision. So I took the medical device job. My background was actually in global supply chain, is where I studied. So got into that space and then realized that doing spreadsheets all day is not scalable, right? You're actually only paid, you're only praised when things don't go wrong, but the second they go wrong, all eyes on you. So I realized I'm going to go transition my skill set more into sales. And I got into a sales role in medical device at the age of 25. And then shortly thereafter, I basically started my own distribution channel to go sell for multiple different medical device companies and scaled that up rather quickly. Now, at the age of 32, I built a manufacturing plant overseas in Germany that we manufacture medical devices. We sell it nationwide. And then I put an operator in place to allow myself to start working on this fund that you and I are in.
So why did you choose to go make the pivot from being a seller, right? Typically, when you think of tech, medical device, right, kind of in the same, level when looking at the earning potential, right? That's probably a $200,000-$400,000 job if done well, right? Why on your end did you go leave the stability of the job after kind of going from the instability of the soccer career to now doing your own thing? And what was that process like?
You start learning about leverage, Sam, right? And what leverage point you want to be on the totem pole. Selling is a great hard skill to have, right? And you want to know how to go sell because you are selling nonstop. But I realized that either you want to be an operator or you want to be more or less a owner per se and working on businesses versus working within the business. And on the day-to-day selling, it's an absolute grind, right? I felt like I mastered that hill and then I want to go climb a new hill. And the hill I want to go climb was owning a portfolio of businesses, investing in other companies. And I felt like that's where my skill set started to lie. From selling in medical device, I was approached by different larger cap companies who asked me to advise for more M&A style to go acquire lower middle market companies in the med device space. So I signed a bunch of NDAs with a bunch of different companies. They were going to acquire $15, $25 million companies. I knew that space quite well. They would bring me in to advise, and I get paid very handsomely to go do so. I captured none of the equity side. And I was like, wow, this is very unique. This is where real money's to be had. So I said, I want to explore this space a little bit more. And that's where I started getting my feet into more of the M&A investing. I bought a business at the age of 28. I invested in about 6 different companies over the last 18 months. And I wanted to go explore this space more because it puts me in a different position than just being a salesman in the medical device space.
Got it. So, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. So, kind of walk us through the journey of you decide, hey, I want to go do my own thing. I want to go build my own company. Like, what's that process like? Because the reason I ask is that I'm sure a lot of people listening to this, they may be, a top sales professional in tech, or they're, earning a really good income in some type of corporate role, and they have a desire to go do their own thing, but they have no clue what to go do next, right? So, business in theory sounds awesome, owning your own thing, but walk us through the nuances and what that process was like and what things you wish you knew, 7 years ago doing this versus what you know now.
So I learned that logic will get you from A to Z, but your imagination can pretty much take you anywhere, right? So let's just dive into that a little bit. So how do you take logic and your imagination to scale and start your own company? I like to use analogies, right, to make it very correlated to an audience. So I'm one of the people who actually, when I work out, I do sets of 10 by 10s. So I do the law of 100. I do a lot of repetition, just like you do, Sam, which is why we resonate together, right? So by building mastery in a space, you start thinking about how you can start levering that up in a different sector. And I said, if I can go sell to an audience, which my avatar was neurosurgeons, spine surgeons, very echelon individuals, and being able to do that over and over again, I said, at this point, like, what else can I sell to them and build a company from that can be a higher ticket value? So, at that point, I just said, I'm comfortable using my skill set today as a salesman and transitioning that into a higher level opportunity, forming a corporation, and now selling multiple products within this sector. So I think it just comes down to the level of confidence within your own niche to go take that into another sector that has a higher opportunity to go scale. And sometimes you just have to go use, a little bit of, I would say, a risk tolerant barometer of yours and what you're willing to lose. And you always have to do your worst case scenario. And if that worst case scenario isn't death, isn't something that's going to put you at huge hindrance in your life, you should absolutely go do it, right? I hear a lot of people talk about this, like, what's the worst that could happen? You go back and live with your parents. Like, that's not that bad, honestly. So I wanted to go risk it all at a young age. I started at 25, starting my own company. And I said, what do I have to lose? And it turned out to be quite foreseeable.
Yeah, that's a really big thing too. Like if you can go start this earlier, it helps a ton, right? 'Cause at 25, you probably have likely a negative-ish net worth, right? Most people are in that bracket of, maybe you got a few bucks, maybe you're negative, maybe you're paying off some student debt, and you don't really have much to go lose, right? Because you haven't gotten to a place where your ego has taken over and you couldn't go back to a corporate role if you didn't want to, right? I think you get to a certain point in your, I'm not putting an age range on it, but like later in your career in which you start working these jobs for so long, it's so accustomed to this lifestyle that you allow to creep up that you couldn't go take that risk. You couldn't go make that jump. And I think something here too is neurosurgeons, brain surgery, right?
Correct.
So I think most people, they'll say it jokingly, like it's not brain surgery. You're legitimately going out and selling to brain surgeons. Like, what's that like?
You have to learn how to speak in a very egalitarian way very quickly, right? So you are selling a product or service to someone who has domain expertise of 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, and 7 years of actual residency, plus a fellowship, making it 8 years. These people are the most educated individuals out there, right? I'm this 25-year-old fuck thinking that I can go sell them a product that in their own domain experience. It's a huge reality check, right? To know how good you really are. But what did that do for me, right? I put myself in environments that were uncomfortable, and I overcame that at a very young age. I'm a huge believer in going to put yourself in environments and get the shit kicked out of you early on. If you know how to go do that, things get a lot easier. Today I'm 32. I can go talk to neurosurgeons about anything. I'm not intimidated at all because I have 7 years of experience now. So if I were anyone today and you're a young entrepreneur wanting to go pursue something, what level of pressure are you in every single day to go test your comfort zone? Because ultimately what you want to go do is move your baseline every single day, every month, whatever that means. Because your baseline is what's hard to you. Your ground zero is very, very important to know where that stands today. So for someone like yourself, Sam, right? Like you are a savant at capital raising. Today, you would never go buy a small triplex or a small fourplex. It's not worth your time. All you think about is huge macro opportunities that you can go lever up at this point now. So you put yourself in very difficult situations as well, going raising tens of millions of dollars at a young age. And now your baseline has moved drastically faster than anyone else. So I think it's very, very important to know like where you want to go put yourself in situations with people who will challenge you. on a day-to-day basis, because that's where you start getting really good.
Yes, there's a one point I want to touch on there first too. So I always thought of this in the sales world that I was in, right? So I came up through tech and entry level sales to sales leadership, and I got lucky in having a boss who, the way I thought about it was, say you're a 6 out of 10 in doing something, and you keep doing that same thing over and over again, you're likely going to go stay a 6 out of 10. But when you go getting yourself in a situation that requires you to go be an 8, and you go figure it out, right? Definitely some bumps in the road in doing so, and part of it is having the opportunity, whether it be a boss that allows you to do so, or whether it be doing your own thing that forces you to do so, right? You then become that better level up type person. And it allows you to go think much differently about what that baseline for yourself is, right? Like what's worth your time? What can you go say no to? So for someone like yourself now, serial entrepreneur, likes building things, like building companies, how do you, have a level of focus in terms of what you're doing, and how do you decide what to go say no to? I think that's something that we see really often in this space, is that it's very easy to stay busy and very hard to stay productive and focused.
Sam, it's the most jam-packed question you probably could ask me today. And I think ask many entrepreneurs is, the art of removing yourself from shiny objects is very difficult, right? You have a plethora of options, and it's actually harder to choose one thing than actually trying to go make your first $100,000, to be honest. So I think what it comes down to is I created actually something called an investment calculator. And what this does to me now is I basically use logic and statistics to know where I want to go put my focus on. So basically on the y-axis, I put the opportunities in front of me. On the x-axis, I put the things that I desire the most within those opportunities. How those two things correlate to one another allows me to make my decision on where I want to go put my focus, right? If things that are a priority to me is being done by 5 p.m. or being able to work remote, I put those things on the top of the x-axis, right? And if starting a fund or investing in companies or starting another business doesn't align with that from a scale from 0 to 10, I probably will not pursue that today. So I'm in a place of a little bit more optionality. And at this point now, is like, I want to build things and buy into companies and do things on a daily basis that can conform to the lifestyle that I want to build. And that's a pretty awesome place to be. I'm having the most fun of my entire life being in this position at the age of 32 versus, when you're in your early 20s, you're just trying a bunch of shit and seeing what sticks. And finally, you start realizing that like you want to actually build a business around your life. Vice versa. You don't want to actually just build a business and not be able to control your life. So, I'm a Capricorn. It's very statistical of me, but I think it's the best approach for me at this point.
Yeah. So I used to use something kind of similar, right? There's times here, I probably had 100 plus people under me at a corporate company that I was at leading a sales org. And we'd have people, both new hires and people in our company that were either looking at, new external roles. It was a role that people transitioned out of pretty quickly, or they moved up. And we had a rubric, and I'm like, hey, go give yourself the 100-point exercise. Go understand and go write down all those things that matter to you when looking at your life and a current role, and weight them, right? Like not everyone's things will be the same. So for you, for example, it may be having yourself time to go work out when you want to, or having the flexibility of living in a certain area weights very highly. Other people may really value earning potential or time off, right? And it's really figuring out what those things are for yourself. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just really understanding who you are as a person and what opportunity and environment can you go really thrive in going forward.
Yeah, and I'll touch on that even a little bit deeper too, because I wouldn't say I forgoed an opportunity to stay in a space where I was highly making a lot of cash flow in an area of medical device. Basically how the space works. So a little context for your audience is, I have a team of reps myself who can go into surgeries, do the surgery, deploy implants, and tell what surgeons are going to, the surgeon will go use implants in the surgery. And then at that point, we know exactly the type of revenue we'll make per case. It's a very addicting type of business to be in because you're walking away knowing your daily cash flow. From that, you are tied to being in hospitals, ORs every single day. That is exhausting, right? Especially in a geographic location like Los Angeles. It is not an easy place to go get around. So I had to go and forego that on a day-to-day basis and put an operator in place, structured as more of an employee retention program where he has an earn-out to be able to start owning equity within the company to allow myself to, move away from the day-to-day operations to start focusing on a much higher macro opportunity. I think today now is like, where do you want to go find mastery with an area that you could arbitrage with large demand and low supply to conform your lifestyle so you are having the most fun while doing so. There's no point of building a $100 million company with the likelihood of having cardiac bypass surgery, right? So go build something that's worth your time. You can have a bunch of fun with your friends at the same time too, which we're doing now.
Yeah, and it's something too that it's a difficult skill at times too, right? To be able to go hire yourself out and to be okay making less in the short term to allow yourself to either make more or a better quality of life in the long term. And something that gets cloudy at times for people, like myself included, in terms of being able to go put people in place that, remove that, tied to a given area or a given piece of work. So kind of going forward now, you are more hands off, kind of more owner versus operator driven in this company,
Yep.
right? Like why the shift to doing what you're doing now, right? In terms of looking at going and buying companies, right? Like help us understand why the pivot and kind of what excites you about that.
I learned a new secret, Sam. So I'll probe you with a question. Do you know the secret of building a small business? It's actually one thing. It's retention. So there's actually a study that showed that the number one source of retention is not culture, it's not compensation, it's actually having a friend at work. So I actually hired another sales rep who became friends with another sales rep at my company. They become best buds. They love going to the hospitals together. They love crushing it out there. And they're out there building this company without me. That is one of the most gratifying feelings. So basically, I unlocked a cheat code by learning how to go build the skill set. Now I said, okay, perfect. I did this within my company. How do I go do this across multiple companies now? Right? That's unlocking the even bigger cheat code. So from doing so, I'm very big on the skill set I probably acquired in the last 12 months is be the glue, meaning that you can go build your own basketball team. Today I was building a fund. I was like, okay, who's going to go manage the fund to the best ability with all the underwriting, the investment strategies? That's Chris, right? I said, well, at this point too, now is like, we want to go raise a bunch of money at this point too. Who can I go recruit to raise a bunch of money for our fund with an opportunity that's worth their time? I think I'm talking to the guy right here, Mr. Silverman himself. Then myself, I'm like, who can be the person who can go work with all the companies and make the CEOs want to go kill for us, right? That's me, right? So it's like, be the Phil Jackson, find your Kobe Bryant, find your Shaquille O'Neal, and start building the right team, and then tying that to the opportunity, and that becomes really fun. You're starting to see the momentum from doing so. So by doing so, Sam, removing myself from the day-to-day operation of one company, I now have advisory shares, equity positions in multiple companies today by doing what I do best at this point. And you have to go take, a little bit of a pivotal moment within your career in order to go do so, because you have to go test different waters of skill sets that you don't know that you have. And the best thing you should go figure out is like, find what's effortless to you. I noticed for myself that like what's effortless to me is I can get a big group of people in a room together and all want to work collaboratively. We go on trips together. I bring groups of people together who all start to enjoy one another's company, who starts doing deals through one another. This is a skill of itself, right? I'm like, how do I maximize that to its highest capability to go create something very enormous for the future for all parties?
Yeah, that's a big thing, right? It's like understanding what you're actually good at, right? Like understanding your skill set and figuring out, okay, this is what I'm really good at. How do I go leverage that same skill set to go make it as much as possible, right? In terms of the scale, the impact, the earnings, right? Whatever that may be for you, you're going to figure out how you go like put those people in place around you to go help complement that skill set too. Like I think anyone, I know I've talked about this on this probably show, a handful of times before as well, is that if you're the best person in any given area, that's worth a lot in terms of leverage, experience, earnings versus being very okay at a lot of things, right? You can easily go hire and bring folks in to go supplement that knowledge going forward. So we're kind of looking at what you're doing now. Walk us through why this opportunity, why this, business plan around kind of what you're focusing on today.
So my thing is I wanted to be in a space, and my experience has always been like blue collar working. So I'm a big believer that the sexier the business, the less return on investment. There's a stat out there that actually shows us that SAG-AFTRA, the actual acting association, there's 182,000 people in that. 87% of them don't qualify for health insurance. Why am I saying this? Because I've always built business in the most boring sector. You may call medical device sexy, but what I actually do is very boring. I have a dual-sided model that I built for 7 years, selling surgical instrumentation that's used every single day in operating rooms, scissors, forceps, the whole thing, things that I know will always be in demand, right? So how do I take that same mindset and start using that in a different arbitrage that maybe is a little bit more permissionless? So I said, okay, how do I go take a industry that I think will have a huge upside for the future? So, funny enough is like my background was putting a lot of rods, screws in people's backs, basically building a foundation in people's backs of screws and rods and creating structure within that, right? I started reading a lot on infrastructure, paving, different sectors. I basically did a hard knocks MBA for the last 8 months of learning different sectors of businesses that I wanted to go invest in. I started putting correlations of together that started to make a good story. What was that story? So I listened to Elon Musk on a podcast not long ago, who was talking about his self-driving vehicle for the truck when it was coming out was not making a turn appropriately in Austin, Texas. So what did he do? He called the city and said, hey, it's not the car. I've tested the car 1,000 times. Please go repave the roads and go line stripe the roads again so I can get my car to start performing on this turn that's caused me angst. Rest assured, what they do, they repaved the roads, relined the roads, and the car performed. I was like, interesting, okay. And then I started also putting a story together of where the Bipartisan Act was actually deploying capital. $110 billion is being deployed in infrastructure, roads, and bridges. So I said, let me look into this like paving and infrastructure space, right? What does laying pipe really look like? No pun intended, right? So this area of laying of piping, paving, infrastructure seem very appealing to me because I know it's always in demand. There's a zero CAC ratio. You're not having to use any sort of crazy marketing spend to go attract customers. And there was so much backlog in all these companies that I was talking to at the time saying this is quite unique. And they're trading at lower equity multiples than most companies. So we're looking at buying companies at 90%, 80% loan to value, trading at 3.5x equity multiples in the paving and infrastructure space, that when you start rolling these things up at scale, they can start trading for 10, 11, 12 times equity multiple once you start reaching a certain threshold of EBITDA. And I was like, okay, this is very unique. So how do I go approach this now? Let's go. We found the opportunity. Let's go build the team. Let's go identify the companies. And that's where we are today with 2 companies under contract within the paving sector.
So something that I think you look at in the private equity space, especially like the roll-up space, is you're taking these disparate companies and trying to pull them together. Like, how do you go tie these companies together in the back end versus just owning a portfolio of companies that do similar things, right? I think that's something that, we see an opportunity like that in the real estate space at times too, in asset classes that may have, smaller, more tertiary type assets that you can go bring together under one roof, and your valuation then goes up in terms of multiple you can go receive based on NOI, right? Your cap rate goes down. In the company space, walk us through what that integration process looks like from you buy 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 companies, and you try to bring them together under one roof.
Yeah, so think of the end in mind, right? So if I'm the buyer of this entire roll-up, like what do I want to go see, right? So start having those conversations early. What they want to go see is synergies within companies in a geographic sector. So what did Chris, myself, and you all do, right? We actually picked 4 different sectors in geographic locations where we actually saw a lot of the bipartisan spend is actually going to be deployed in the municipality space. So we said, okay, we found 4 areas of Colorado, Utah, Texas, Florida, in New York, actually, so 5 sectors that we found quite appealing with actual companies for sale in that sector doing both municipality and private. So we said, okay, if we find 3 or 4 companies in each sector and start consolidating back-end resources, and what does that look like? Accounting, legal, things that we know that one estimator can probably do for 2 different companies. And we can use less manpower to go deploy in 2 companies by consolidating resources that individual company does not see together. We know we can go increase NOI from doing so. Secondly, when you're actually bidding jobs, sometimes you're co-bidding with another company. You have a company who does mainly paving. You have another company that can do more infrastructure groundwork. Now, if we own both of those companies now, you can start doing larger bids congruently together. That becomes quite appealing when the agency knows that the same owner owns both of those companies, now starting to attack larger bids. Before, that company was only doing $8 million jobs, $9 million jobs. Now they can start attacking $25, $30 million jobs. So by putting 2 companies in a given geographic sector on one big job together, creates scale, creates larger NOI on the bottom end for each job that we actually start doing. So by bringing on an advisory team and talking about this of people who have built $30, $40 million companies in this space, they're the ones that actually advised us within this type of approach.
So as you're kind of going out and scaling, right, depending on the size of the company, there may be the issue of having a lot of internal knowledge tied to the owner, right? How do you go mitigate that when looking at taking over ownership of a company like this to make sure the leadership team is still sound, make sure the right people in the right places, and that things can run smoothly even after that person may have built the company for the last 20, 30, 40 years is stepping away?
Yeah, that's a very important question because we're in the space right now where people are getting very interested in buying business. But they're very insecure to know once they go take over that business, what will happen, right? So what we've structured a lot of times is the minimum the owner has to stay on for at least 12 to 18 months. And we actually do is 10%, at least a minimum 10% seller carry or equity rollover back into the company or potentially back into our fund. The reason for that is that we want them to have skin in the game. We want to be able to also be able to pick up the phone anytime, call them. And the key aspect of also making an offer into a company versus a piece of real estate is very different. The reason for that is people have more of an emotional tie to a company than a 30 unit or 40 unit building. So you want to be really respectful not to lowball any sort of company owner when making an offer at their business because you want to have the optionality to be able to pick up the phone and call them anytime. So the two companies we have under contract right now that we're speaking to, both will have equity retention in the company. They're going to be an advisory board within the business as well and be able to guide us through any issues that we might have, right? The whole goal is just to remove them from the day-to-day operations more or less to then eventually find them the replacement together rather than us doing it by themselves because they have the 20 years of experience that can pay down any ignorance debt that we don't know. So it's critical to understand how you structure these deals with the owners and make sure the owner is the right fit and his company is actually viable, right? And investable, I should say, because some owners are stuck in their ways, right? Us three are all 30-year-old entrepreneurs speaking to people who are in their 50s and 60s, right? They have to be able to still respect us as business owners, as owners of their company, coming in and understand that we have our methodology of doing things and they have their way of doing things. How do we commingle those two things together to assure we'll have synergies for the next 10 to 15 years? And that's the goal, right? It comes down to retention, as I spoke about earlier. And that's coming from a previous owner, the new CEO, is assuring that there's alignment throughout the process.
Yeah. So when you first take over a company, like walk us through that first 30, 60, 90 days in which you're taking it over, right? What are you looking for? What are you analyzing? What changes do you make right away? What changes do you make long term? Can help us understand how you think about how to go make these, as operationally efficient as possible. Because one of the big benefits to me when looking at companies is that there's far more room for operational improvement than real estate, right? Like once you go buy a piece of real estate, if you're buying an apartment building, even if you nail it, maybe getting 5, 10, 20% more than your neighbor in terms of a similar type property. In a business, you have, unlimited upside, also unlimited downside too. So walk us through kind of that first period of takeover time. What do you look for? What do you change right away? And what do you kind of look more longer term to go change if needed?
Yeah, so the first 30 days, like you don't want to go into a company and disrupt anything that's currently working, right? Especially when you have investor capital into the mix, you want to assure there's obviously going to be a level of stability the first 30 days and making yourself very comfortable in the environment that you're coming to a new organization. So it's working with the owner and the management team and asking them just a couple simple questions, right? So new ownership in place, like tell us about what you see as potential growth opportunities, each quarter that you probably didn't foresee before. And why do we ask that, right? Because sometimes when the owner is in the operation day to day, he thinks of things a lot differently. But now he has some chips off the table. He's like, you know what? Maybe that guy Joey over there, who's an estimator, could do a better job. And we can go find another estimator over the next 60 days and start recruiting that person. Again, I want to focus on talent, as much talent as possible, because having the best talent will start creating this flywheel of a machine to start assuring that this company has good sustainability to continue to grow. After like 60 to 90 days, we want to go in there and start understanding, can we start cutting any costs that are a little bit oversaturated, right? Can I start looking at legal? Can I start looking at marketing, accounting, and start bringing that in-house with resources that maybe we can get offshore that they're currently not using, or things that I have from friends' companies that we can start implementing within the business. These are little tidbits that you want to go do just to start increasing, 5-7% growth, and then maybe cutting expense ratios by a few points as well. That can make a drastic impact just in the first year by increasing revenue by an extra 8%, right? So it's assuring that like you're making a couple of chess moves throughout the process in a methodical way. That's not going to be any drastic change because you're working in an organization that usually has 40, 50, 100 people, and you want to be respectful throughout that process.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing too, just making sure that people that you're inheriting, right, are on board with what you're doing. I think at times these people can be there for 5, 10, 20 years, and making sure they're on board, they're bought in through incentive programs, but also just really through hearing them and understanding where they are in the organization, what they do, what their role is, what it's looked like in the past, and kind of making changes gradually as well to go, do what's best for them, the company.
Exactly. You want to grow through acquisition too, right? In this model. So the three GPs in the fund, myself, you, and Chris, like, we're not going to go take a $25 million company and take it to 35 in 18 months. That's not the strategy here at all. You want to grow through acquisition. You're trying to build and buff up that balance sheet to show that you can go start taking on better terms, better debt options to go acquire more companies, to go reach that 10, 15, $20 million EBITDA mark within the fund. And if you're going with that mentality of just like slow progressive growth, and then you also understand that there's a cost of goods component, there's a cost of operation and CapEx operation as well that will also start to increase within the operations. You start and understand that you have built a sustainable business of reasonable inputs for reasonable outputs. And again, like the whole goal out of this is like, you want to be predictable within your measurements of what you're putting units in for units out. So if you don't do anything too drastic and you're buying sustainable companies that have been around for 20 years, that have constantly produced $1, $2, $3 million of EBITDA, you'll be in a good place for the next decade.
Yeah, no, super helpful. So before we wrap up here too, what advice do you have for kind of young entrepreneurs looking to go do their own thing?
Go build a company first before you even just think about buying a company. The reason for that too is like, you need to go feel what operations feels like. You want to go understand the process of every part of a business before you start advising other people on how to run a business, because you lose credibility when you haven't done it, right? I spent 7-8 years operating companies day in and day out before I really started investing in other businesses. So if I'm a young entrepreneur today, I would just try to go find a level of mastery in an area that you can go create a business within, right? Whether it's marketing, whether it's sales, whatever it may be, that you can start going and bringing a level of leverage to the company through technology, through media, through people, through any sort of capital potentially, and using that in your way to grow a business, right? Building to your first $1 million of doing a lot of repetition in one area, and then adding these different forms of leverage to be able to go scale that organization. And then knowing what works and what does not work, right? And then being able to bifurcate the good things from the bad things. Once you do that, at this point, you're going to be a lot more confident in starting to scale other things in life, right? People always ask, like, should you just go, you work on one company or have a portfolio of companies? It's probably a topic of the conversation today because the hold code is becoming quite popular in today's environment via the Twitter and LinkedIn game. And there's a reason why the S&P 500 is very, very viable, right? It's a portfolio of well-balanced companies. I think when you can go master one company really well and you've proven yourself that you've been able to go do that, at that point now, there's a sense of opportunity to go have pieces of multiple companies to set yourself up for the future. And if you start thinking about that at an early entrepreneurial stage, that has the best security, in my opinion, for longevity.
Cool. Sam, before we hop here, how and why should the listeners reach out to you?
My thesis to life is, can you build a scalable business for a scalable life, right? I'm very big on that. I'm a health and wellness guy as well. I love building businesses. I have the aspirations to go build very big businesses at the pace that I want to go build it at, that's going to be sustainable to the things I want to go do in life as well. The traveling, the being with friends at the same time too. People lose sight of that. So I think it's important to know that, the content I put out there can be more business related, but the same token is how can it relate to your own personal life so you can build those things in continuity. So my LinkedIn is just Sam Mahmood. And then I'm on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn as well.
Cool. Sam, thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thank you for tuning into the Fully Funded Show hosted by Sam Silverman. If you are enjoying the content, let's take your journey further in the Fully Funded Mastermind. The Fully Funded Mastermind offers more than just insights. It's a mastermind community designed to solve the real challenge of raising capital. By joining, you gain direct access to strategies, coaching, and a network dedicated to turning your financial goals into achievements. Don't let capital raising be a barrier to your success. Visit fullyfunded.capital to explore how our mastermind community can pave your way to financial growth.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fully Funded Show. If you enjoyed today's insights, hit follow, share with your investing pals, and drop us a review. Connect with us on social media for bonus content. Your success is our mission. Keep those funds flowing. See you next time.